Welcome to Freshly Brewed Comics. My name is Jake.
And Victoria.
And this week we'll be talking about the life
and death
of Vertigo Comics. Stay tuned.
Vertigo Comics was founded in 1993 by Karen Berger as a subprint of DC Comics that was aimed towards mature readers.
And DC even had some proto-Vertigo titles dating back to the early 80s, such as Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Grant Morrison's Animal Man, and of course, Neil Gaiman's Sandman. And all three of the books I just mentioned were also a part of the British invasion of comic books, which is a very, very important time for comics because comics at that time were all superheroes, guys in tights punching each other. And then those three writers I just mentioned are kind of in the forefront of the British invasion. They came in and they were just like, we're going to tell smart, dark stories that challenge the reader's, thought process. So it was a very important time for comics, and that's why early Vertigo is one of my favorite, probably my second favorite time period in comics after Silver Age Marvel.
My first pick is also a writer who hails from the British invasion era of Vertigo Comics, is Enigma by Peter Milligan with art by Duncan Fegredo, who we know from his work with Mike Mignola in the Hellboy universe.
He did some great work with Mike Mignola.
And he also does great work with Peter Milligan in this book. So this is a 8-issue miniseries that came out in 1993, and it's about the titular character Michael Smith, who notices that his favorite comic book character, the Enigma, is now in reality, along with all of the stories and issues that go along in the comic book itself. So when things start to happen beyond the comic book, Michael Smith goes and seeks out the original author of the Enigma to find out how to stop all the mayhem going on. It's really experimental, and it's really cool. A lot of Peter's early works are very experimental. You have this, Shade the Changing Man is very experimental, along with Rogue and Gosh.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so a lot of his early Vertigo stuff is really cool, and I'm a big fan of his stuff, just in general. But this book, we couldn't do a Vertigo episode without mentioning one of his earlier stuff. So, yes, Enigma is a really cool read. I like it.
I'm about to fucking sound like an insane person.
Yep.
Because my next pick is The Invisibles by Grant Morrison. Where Grant Morrison goes, every single conspiracy theory that crackhead on the corner is telling you, they're all true. Said aliens in Area 51. Roswell. He said government putting tracking devices in polio vaccines. Fucking everything. He's like, the government is spying on you. They're your worst enemy.
Oh
Aliens are real. Take psychedelic drugs because they'll open your third eye. He's a madman in this book, and it is so entertaining. It's so well written. It has some of his best work ever. The group, the Invisibles, who are kind of like these freedom fighters that fight against the government, like I was mentioning. They go against the government, who is also known as the Outer Church, which are trying to summon like these weird interdimensional demons to take over the world. And it's weird that they put the authority, like the government, everyone that you think is supposed to be good, they're all evil. And then these magicians, who the bad guys often label as terrorists, are the good guys. They use magic to fight, and they're all about free will. And Grant Morrison injects a lot of his own personal philosophy. My enjoyment from this mainly came from watching all these lectures and interviews with Morrison and reading his other works, because everything that is Grant Morrison is in this book. It's the most I've ever seen a writer put in himself into a book, because it's so him, and I love it for that, because there's a lot of things, like his concept of time is that he thinks that time is just like soil where humans grow, and time, it's like, I'm gonna sound like a lunatic, but this is how he thinks. He's like, me 10 minutes ago, I could be right over there, but I can't point at it. So he thinks time all happens at once. I have no idea. But he explores concepts like that in this book.
That's cool.
Time is very important to this book, because there's a whole arc about a time machine, and it goes back in time, so the guy that builds the time machine can learn to build it, so he sends it back to him. It's wacky novel. What a wacky series of books. Invisibles by Grant Morrison. Check it out. I love it. So what you got for us next, Vic?
My next read is, for real, the first comic book I ever read. I know I've been saying that a lot, but, like, this is the book that got me into comics. This is the one. But, like, this is actually, like, the first graphic novel comic book that my eyes laid themselves upon. And that is Fables by Bill Willingham. I read this, I want to say, back in 2012.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a long time ago.
I read this first because I was playing The Wolf Among Us, which is the Telltale game series that's based off of this comic book series, which then it kind of gets confusing because they made a comic book based off of that game, which is already based off of the comic book. So there's a Wolf Among Us comic book series, which is actually good, too. Which is surprising, because you'd think it's just Fables, but it's different, and it's good. So, but we're going to talk about Fables. So,
Alright.
So Fables is a 150-issue long series that follows Bigby Wolf, who is the sheriff of Fabletown, which is a town shrouded by magic in New York City that all these fairy tale characters and creatures inhabit. And it's fucking so good. I love it. I also want to mention that Fables did the 50th issue wedding first. Spoilers. No offense to Batman going on right now, but Fables beat you to it. But this series, it's just so near and dear to my heart, and it's the first book I ever read, and it was the first Vertigo. I just always been on the Vertigo train ever since, because this was the first book that I had ever read, first comic book.
Yeah.
I love everything about it. It has such the 90s like Vertigo vibe. Like, the art's great, the story's so well written. I will say it does drop off a little bit after issue 100.
Okay.
But I love it. If you like fantasy and fairy tales and all kinds of stuff like that, I really, really recommend Fables to anybody. I know it's almost like, it's like the girly pick because she's talking about Fables. No! It's good! Read Fables! That's it! What do you got for us next, Jakey?
I have Daytripper by Gabriel and Fabio Moon.
Nice!
This is a very heartwarming read.
Such a good book!
Surprisingly heartwarming, since each issue ends with the main character of, forgive me for this pronunciation, Bras, I think his name is. B-R-A with the accent and then an S. I'm just going to say Bras, because I don't know how to pronounce it. But each issue ends with the main character dying in a different way, but the story still progresses. But each issue is also a different day in his life.
Right, and each issue picks up from where he died. So it picks up from that stage in his life?
Kind of, because I thought that too, but I haven't read it in a while. But this is one of my favorite picks. This is one of the first, really, indie books I've read. Because there's an issue, halfway through where, he's, a kid. So it's not, a linear story completely, but it does have continuity.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah. It's a 12-issue series by Fabio Moon and Gabriel that really explores just death in general, and how death really isn't such a bad thing. Yes, it's sad. Yes, Death is a cute woman with curly hair.
She's cute.
But death really isn't such a bad thing, is a theme that they explore in this. It's kind of just... It's about leaving a legacy. That's one of the main characters. That's one of his problems in the story, is that he's stuck writing these obituaries, and he doesn't really want to write them, but he's good at them, and he does them. And each issue ends with an obituary, which is cool, which I picked up the second time I read it. Surprisingly, I don't know how I didn't. It's pretty obvious. But it's just such a great read. It's subtle. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. And the art's gorgeous too. They both do the art. And I actually have this one signed and sketched by them. If it gets into focus. Which is great. I love this book. It's one of my all-time favorite reads. It's perfect. It's a perfect read.
My final pick for our Vertigo Spectacular is a book that is near and dear to my heart, as gory and as violent as it may be. Preacher, written by Garth Ennis with unbelievable art by Steve Dillon.
Yes.
So you haven't read Preacher, right?
I have not. I know it's blasphemous, no pun intended. But, yeah, I know it's supposed to be, like, spectacular.
It's spectacular is an understatement for this book. Preacher follows a reverend named Jesse Custer who becomes possessed by the product of an angel and a demon, who's known as Genesis. Okay. And he has the word of God, so he can force people to do whatever he says because of this possession. Okay. And him and his friends Tulip and vampire friend Cassidy are on the hunt to find God, who is a fugitive, to try to track him down and figure out what is going on with Genesis and all that stuff. Meanwhile, they're being tracked by her star, who is he's kind of like the people in Indiana Jones.
Is he like a Nazi?
He has like Nazi vibes.
Okay. Nazi
they're
vibes.
like Nazi vibes. They have they hunt down religious artifacts and stuff.
Oh, so okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so they're trying to get Genesis out of Jesse.
Okay.
It's very cool. The book is fantastic. I can't stress it enough how good this book is. Cassidy is my favorite character in this story. Okay. You can never go wrong with the Irish vampire. And I really think that Preacher is one of the stories that really cemented Vertigo Comics and made people realize that this is a subreddit.
Yeah,
to
definitely,
not fuck around
definitely.
with, you
because,
know?
I mean, it was also one of the first super, super popular Vertigo books to be a non-DC kind of like a more of like a Modern Image book. You know how Modern Image is, you know, it's a series. It started volume 1, end here. But a lot of Vertigo books are like that, where you start at volume 1, you just end at volume whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the first to like really be popular.
Right. It's still popular to this day. I'm really glad the show came out, because that even made people... boosted it and made people want to go back to the original source material. And they should, because this is by far one of the greatest Vertigo titles that are out there. And that will be out there.
And our last pick we kind of picked together, because this is a character and a series that's pretty important to both of us. Mm-hmm. Hellblazer. All 300 issues of it. I haven't read all 300 issues. I think I hit like the 200 mark, and then my computer broke. I was reading it digitally, but it's great. It's very British. It's very British, because the first American writer to write it was Brian Azzarello, and he's like late hundreds, I think. Yeah, he's like late hundreds. He's like 180, I think, around that point. I could be wrong, but I'm like 99% sure that's when he started writing it. And it's just pretty great. I mean, I like Hellblazer a lot. It was the first time Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon collaborated was for Garth Ennis's run, which is one of my favorite runs ever. Yeah. Because it was the first one I read to completion, so it has a soft spot in my heart. I just love how much of a bastard he is. Yep. He's just such a dick, but you can't help but root for him. Right.
Because everything always goes his way.
Everything
as much of an asshole as he is, it always goes his way. So for those that don't know, Constantine, he's like a clairvoyant...
occultist.
Like he's a cultist.
Magician, kind of. But he kind of just talks his way out of things. Right. Magic is like a last resort for him.
And he's very interesting. He deals a lot with like demons and spirits and ghosts.
Possessions.
Ghouls.
Ghosts and ghouls.
Ghosts and ghouls. Yeah, and I love his character, as I've said probably too many times to point now, in James Tynion Ford's Constantine 13-issue run. He's a great character in this. Dangerous Habits is one of my favorite arcs of all time.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest comic books ever written. Yep. It's very good.
What else can you say about it? It's just that good.
Nothing. He's a bastard.
He's a bastard. That's all we gotta say about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else that you want to add? Anything?
He looks like Sting! Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Freshly Brewed Comics, the show where we drink coffee and talk about our favorite books.
And join us next week for Battle of the Books. Hey, and welcome to... No, I don't want to do hey.
Hey!
I'll just do welcome. Let's go.
Vertigo Comics was founded in 1993 by Karen Berger as a subprint of DC Comics that was aimed towards adult.
You ready? Welcome to Freshly Brewed Comics. My name is Jake.
And I'm Victoria.
And this week, we'll be talking about the life and death.
Fuck, I got
You were
thirsty.
drinking. You gotta stop drinking.
Vertigo Comics was founded in 1993 by Karen Berger as a subprint of DC Comics for mature readers.
And DC also had some kind of like proto-Vertigo titles, such as Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Grant Morrison's Animal Man,
And of course,
John Constantine, Hellblazer.
oh, this is Sandman.
Oh,
You fool! Our blooper.
that is a good blooper. You know Sandman?
I'll be like, why didn't you talking about Sandman in your video? Have you read it? You read it already?
You read it?
Good. We didn't finish it, so we don't want to talk about it until we read all of it.